So, what's going on? Well, it's interesting to me that one of the things that is often missing in any sales process is specificity to fully understand when that prospect's going to take action and buy. I think there's a number of reasons for this. Oftentimes, sales reps are afraid to ask some of these specific types of questions because they're afraid of the answer, and ignorance is often bliss. Oftentimes, they're talking to people who don't fully understand what has to happen, who needs to be involved, or what that full on process is on the prospect end of things as well. So we want to take out kind of this black hole in the middle of our sales cycle and get a little more specific so that we can actually, through how we engage our prospects, get better at identifying, confirming, and clarifying when prospects will actually make and execute a purchasing decision. So let me ask you this. Does some of this sound familiar in your role? Maybe you're a manager and you feel that the reps working for you are pressured to tell you what you want to hear. Maybe you have a process that you're really only visiting the forecast or the health of the pipeline from a 30, 60, 90-day perspective once a month, or I have some clients that are really only doing this once a quarter, or trying to really get all the subjectivity out of this and using pure analytics and artificial intelligence to analyze what's going on in the pipeline in order to spit out that number. Maybe you also have the situation where the same deal that you've looked at from the beginning of the month keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. And we think it's qualified, yet we really don't understand why the prospect hasn't bought. I had the opportunity to work with a client a couple months back, and he had that situation. He had two opportunities that he was forecasting, and they weren't closing. So we started to look at, well, what's going on with those opportunities? And we went back to the beginning. Well, the reality is some things had changed in that prospect situation. There had been organizational changes. There had been some industry changes. And what was qualified in February when it was forecasted and didn't close was clearly no longer forecastable and no longer qualified, yet the rep hadn't moved it off the forecast. It was still kind of on a wing and a prayer that we were hoping that would come in. And so some of this is what's going on. Early on in my career, part of the forecasting methodology that we used in sales was I took the forecast from my reps. I had a team of 10 to 12 reps, took that forecast from each individual, cut it in half, rolled it up to my manager, who cut it in half, rolled it up to his manager. And the reality was, at the end of the period, whether it was a month or a quarter, even though we were just kind of slicing it and slicing it and slicing it, we still weren't delivering on the number that we thought we would be able to deliver on. It was really crazy. We did not have a handle on our business. We did not have a handle on what the prospects were thinking. We only had a handle on what the reps were hoping would happen. So one of the things that we have learned in working with clients all around the globe, and this has been confirmed by studies from CSO Insights and others, but that if you look across industries on the B2B side, only about 55% on average of total forecasted deals close in the initial time frame that they were expected to close in. That means the balance of 45% either never close or they're pushed and pushed and pushed. We want to improve that rate. And one of the reasons many of our clients turn to value selling associates is for strategies to close that gap and improve the efficacy, the validity, and the integrity of the forecast that they're submitting to managers. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about some specific techniques. And quite frankly, I think this is the most understated utilized, implemented, and valued aspect of a selling process, of learning techniques to build specificity into understanding when they're going to buy. And one of those techniques is going to be, how do we build reverse timelines with the prospect and get their commitment to those timelines so that we understand when things are going to happen and what is the timing associated with that. We're going to also talk specifically about how we can use our written communication during our sales cycle to be a confirmation exercise and help us further the opportunity and create urgency and motivation for the prospect to act. Our written communication today is critical. It's our ability to create customer-specific sales communication that surrounds either our face-to-face, our phone, our virtual sales calls, in order to support and reconnect with those buyers when we are not there. Let's face it, our buyers are busy. Everybody has ADD. They go from one meeting to another, and the expectation that we have that they're going to remember 100% of the things that were discussed in any given meeting when they're moving on to the next one is that expectation is probably not a good one. So we need to help them with our written communication. And the whole ultimate goal of this is to help us build credibility with our management by being able to deliver on what we said we can do. One of the reasons we do planning, forecasting, and have a business plan to achieve our goals is because it demonstrates that we're in control of our business, not being controlled by it. And the concepts that we're going to talk about today are not only a mechanism for you to leverage and build your professionalism with your prospects, but build your credibility with your management team as well, as someone who knows what is going on in their business and can accurately deliver on that. So let me open up a poll here real quick. Let me share this with you. What is sales forecasting? Is it art? Is it science? If you had to pick one, what would you select here? Art or science? Let me launch this poll real quick here so you can look at that. Let's make a choice. I know I'm asking you to make a choice where some of you might say, hey, it's a little bit of both, but I'm asking you to pick one and say, what do we got? We've got about 40% of you picking. Let's make a decision, select one of these topics, and then I'll share the results here with all of us. Is sales forecasting art or science? Interesting as I look at this. So let me get ready to close this out, give you 1 or 2 more seconds here to make a decision. We're getting close to complete here. Excellent. So let me share these results with you. And here's what you have shared with us. You have shared with us that about 60% of you, 59% of you think it's science, and 41% of you think it's art. The art to me says it's guessing, it's intuition, it's having a sense that you might that this is ready to go. Where science says that I've got data and I can demonstrate through that data that this deal is going to close. We're going to try through the tactics and the skills and the process that I'm going to share with you to go and focus on the science of this. How can I, as a rep or manager, have confidence that the prospect is going to do what they said they're going to do and take action and complete the steps they need to do in the time they're going to do it? And we're going to talk specifically about some tactics and a process to bring more science, bring more proof, bring more repeatability into the accuracy of our sales forecasts. So, kind of touched on this already, but there is pressure more and more on us for forecast accuracy. If you are working for a publicly traded company, you have a 90-day mentality on results. If you are working for a company that is about to go public or might have a liquidity event coming forward to it, sales leaders are being pressured to deliver repeatable revenue because the rest of the business is making decisions and investments based on the results that you're promising. That said, most organizations don't have time for tons of analytical tools. And the reality is the analytical tools that we do have are focused on the data that we create. And the challenge becomes, how do we know that that data is actually reflective of what the prospect or what's going on the other side of the table or telephone as we go through that? So it's a big challenge of this pressure. And, by definition, forecasting is a challenge. One of the things that I run into often when I deal with clients and trying to assess what's going on with the forecast is because they don't have enough opportunities in the pipeline and they don't have a healthy pipeline. They're trying to take the opportunities that they do have and force unnatural acts, unnatural buying decisions as a result of that. So one of the first things that we look to when we're assessing forecast accuracy is, do we have enough pipeline? Do we have good qualified opportunities that are in there? We can then get into the details of those opportunities, but one of the things that I find is clients look at the health of their pipeline. They say, okay, these three things are going to happen in, let's say, the first quarter of 2019 today. These three opportunities are scheduled to close. That same rep gets a call from their manager on December 19th, and the conversation goes, hey, what can you do to pull those opportunities forward? We need those opportunities that are scheduled that you think are ready to close in January and pull them in to December to cover a shortfall or to make our number in December. And all of a sudden the rep is doing unnatural things or trying to create an unnatural buying opportunity for that prospect. So the rep is trying to change the plan. Maybe they try to offer incentive. If I drop the price, if I give you free seats, if I throw in a year warranty, whatever that is, they throw in those embellishments and try to pull forward. That's an unnatural act. That's trying to create something where that is contrary to a timeline that prospect has already created. We all know what a forecast is. It's a prediction of the future. And if you're looking at predicting the future, almost by definition, the further out you forecast, the harder it is to be accurate. So looking at things on a longer term basis, it's much harder to be accurate in your forecast. I can tell you what's going to happen tomorrow, but it's probably a lot more difficult for me to tell you what's going to happen 2 weeks from tomorrow. So best practices are continually updating this forecast in a rolling way as information changes and information becomes visible to the prospect. So what are some of the things that can impact our forecast? Well, outside of the client's need and what they are planning to do, there are a ton of things that can impact a forecast, both in the short and the longer term. Some of them are external to either the vendor or the buyer, such as political environment, weather, other events that might be going on in the industry. And then some of them are internal. So thinking about what's internal to the buyer, like a competitor comes in, a reorganization takes place in your client company. Something changes that changes from the time that it was forecastable to now, and understanding that. But one of the things that we try to do when we're teaching sales reps how to improve their forecasting and managers on how to better manage that is to focus on what you can control. We can't control that a blizzard might hit the East Coast and shut some businesses down. People might not be able to get to work. We can't control some of the other variables that happen that change and shift things. But what we can control is our effectiveness and our ability to align our process with the buyer at any given time. So at the end of the day, here's the question we're all trying to ask. When will they actually buy? When are you going to do it? When are you going to sign? When are you going to send it to me? When are you going to execute? When are you actually going to do this? And how do we identify when they're going to buy is identifying how and what needs to happen for them to be in a position to buy. And so we look at this as a full-blown, how do you qualify a prospect? And kind of going back to the basics, because often when things don't close, remember, it's not because I don't have the skill to pick up the phone and get a prospect to answer the question, are you going to sign this or not, or what's it going to take for you to sign this? It's because I've missed something earlier in the sales cycle, and the prospect isn't even close to being ready for that. So we look at this as a robust, multi-dimensional qualification process. And the fourth component of that qualification process is really understanding the when. So the first component of this qualification is really, do I understand how the prospect is going to answer the question, should I buy from you? We call this creating a differentiated vision match. That means that the salesperson and the prospect, or the individuals at the prospect that they're dealing with, have a joint understanding of the problems that prospect is trying to solve, why those problems are worth solving in the first place, and how they're going to impact the business. So in the value selling framework, it's not just finding the problems. It's not just identifying the pain, if you will. It's identifying the problems and connecting those problems to a business outcome that's measurable and time-bound. We call that a business issue. And making that connection very confirmed and overt with the seller and the buyer. And then understanding what is it about the solution that prospect's looking for. What do they think they need, and how do we satisfy that need with our solution? And how is that the best solution for the prospect? Because if we are perceived as the best solution for that individual prospect, we are then in fact differentiated for that prospect. So should I buy from you? Do you even have something that I need? Do you have something that I want? Do you have something that makes sense for me? The next component of qualification is answering the question for the prospect, well, is it worth it? I'm happy to make an investment in a solution if the impact of that solution exceeds the cost of that solution. That's what we call value. Is it worth more than I'm going to spend to get that solution? And having that understanding of the value. How is the prospect going to measure that? Is it real? Is it attainable? Is it quantifiable? And is it enough value, if you will, for them to take action? And the reality is, for many of us in today's world, it's not, is it a more valuable solution than a head-to-head competitor? Many of the clients that I work with are not creating, not in a situation, if you will, where it's am I going to buy vendor A or vendor B? It's I'm going to buy from vendor A. I want this solution, but now I have to go sell that business case to get the capital for that purchase. And I'm competing with other executives and managers in my business who all want the same bucket of money. So it's not just, am I the most valuable solution for that specific set of problems? It is often, am I the most Am I a valuable enough solution that when the buyer and the executives go to fight for the capital, they are in a position to fund this business case versus another business case? The next level of qualification has to do with with can I buy? Am I having these conversations with the people who have the authority, the ability to actually make and impact these decisions? And we call that power. And then the fourth dimension of qualification, and this is the most overlooked element of qualification, is building a plan with the prospect to realize the value. So the key of the plan in the value selling framework is the ability for it to be a collaborative process between the sales rep and the buyer to focus the buyer on value realization by implementing or purchasing your products and services. So when we think about this plan, it's a very specific and different type of plan than most salespeople are used to thinking of. It's not a closed plan. A closed plan is an individual sales rep's set of activities that they're going to drive to quote unquote close the business. The plan in the value selling context is a sales tactic and tool set to create customer specific plans around value realization that allow you to confirm what has to happen and when the prospect's going to buy. So we ask our clients to think about this plan a little bit differently than they might have before. And why is that? Well, because if I'm fully qualifying these opportunities, I understand all four of these elements from the prospect's point of view. It's not that I think they're going to make a decision in mid-December. It's that they told me they would make that decision in mid-December and execute it on December 21st. And understanding and driving that specificity into that. So let's get into what are the mechanics of this mutual plan. And it is one of the most powerful sales tools that you can use and build into your process to improve your efficacy. And there's a lot of, we have a lot of data that demonstrates how this works and how it makes such a huge difference for our prospects. So what is it? Well, the plan is a simple written communication that serves to confirm the elements of qualification that we've discussed. Should I buy? Is it worth it? And identifies the people that need to be involved in that. And then also builds on a timeline that focuses on the timeline the prospect aspires to realize the value. So it's a written communication, and even though we say it's mutual, the sales rep is going to create this communication. In today's world, it's often an email. If you don't know if you should send a letter or do an email, ask the prospect how they want to receive your written communication. Do they want it as an attachment? Do they want it in an email? Ask the prospect what I can put in the subject line so it stands out in your inbox and doesn't get lost in the day-to-day noise that most of us have in our inboxes today. But it's a written communication that's going to surround our sales calls. It drives specificity into the clarification and the confirmation of their reasons to buy from you. And I always assume that this written communication is going to get forwarded to somebody that I might not have met with, so I want to make sure it's crisp and clean and clear. It is the plan that summarizes how the prospect is going to realize the value. That is the key to this. The key is that it's not about you, it's about them. It's summarizing what they've told you, their reasons to buy, their needs for your solutions and services, the impact they expect to get, that they've told you they expect to get, and the timeline to get this business value realized. Now, one of the keys to understanding that timeline is to building out the concept of this vision match and connecting your solution to time-bound and measurable business issues and business objectives and business goals. We use the word mutual to insinuate that this is not a document to introduce new information. This is not a document where you make assumptions on their solutions, their perception of value, or anything. We are just using this as a confirmation exercise. Now, you may have told them that you're going to include a piece of information or proof of a piece of information for what you've been discussing. But again, that would be part of the confirmation. We're not using this to introduce new information. We're using this to confirm. So think of it. I want that prospect to read my communication and say, yep, she understood me. Yep, that's what we discussed. Yes, that's exactly what I need. Yes, that's exactly how I'm going to measure the impact. And yes, this is the timeline that I've agreed to. That's my visual that I want to see when my prospect is reading this. And like I said, it is a confirmation exercise. Written communication is critical to surround our synchronous communication, whether it's a face-to-face sales call, a phone call, a virtual web call, however we are having that synchronous communication to get on the same page. The written communication is our ability to confirm that synchronous with asynchronous. They can read it, they can reread it, they can forward it, they can share it, they can comment on it and clarify from that perspective. The best plan letters that I have sent inspire feedback. They get the feedback back. And what makes it a good plan letter? It's not the grammar and the bullets. It's the content being reflective of what we discussed and accurate of what we discussed. Now, what the key to having one of these plan letters is then to building out a timeline. And I call this backwards thinking. We start with the end in mind. When does the prospect want to realize the value? What's the time frame of that? What is the time frame for them to realize the value as a result of our solution? If I understand that key milestone, that key date, then I can start backing into the things that must take place for that to be possible. And I can work with the prospect and assign dates to that. If you want to receive value by the end of the first quarter, well, that says that we better get this installed by the beginning of the first quarter. And if we want to get it installed by the beginning of the first quarter, then that means that we need to, probably get a contract signed pretty darn quickly in order to meet that timeline. And if we are going to get the contract signed pretty darn quickly, and you can commit to do that by Friday, then we probably need to wrap up this needs analysis and make sure you have everything you need to make that decision by Friday. And I can start to use this as my mechanism to create and collaborate with the prospect on dates and timelines. Because now all of a sudden, if I'm focused on this value realization concept from the prospect's mind, you can see this is almost like a series of dominoes. And if the business value is even pushed out way far in advance, I can still start to back into those time frames, and that gives me an accurate understanding of, is this a near-term opportunity, a mid-term opportunity, or a longer-term opportunity in terms of my ability to accurately forecast when this is going to happen. But the skill to create this timeline is extremely important, and then to replay it and confirm it in writing is critical for your success. And as a sales manager, then All I want to look at when a sales rep working with me is going to submit a forecast, all I want to look at is your plan letter, because that gives me a piece of customer facing written communication that validates that at that point in time they were on the same page with the timeline. And I can look through that and we can have a conversation solely looking at the plan and the timeline in terms of our ability to drive forecast accuracy. I have a client that after rolling out value selling chose to run their entire sales management forecasting process through the plan letter. And it was extremely powerful. First of all, it forced the habits and the behaviors of the reps to do this, to do this type of written communication. Number two, if you're going to do this written communication, you have to do the upfront work on qualification. You can't just have a single meeting, identify a problem that you're going to solve, and shoot off a proposal. And so it brought them into so much more of a consultative role with the prospect, elevated the perception of professionalism and business acumen of their sales reps, because what was the focus? The focus was of all of their meetings, of all of their written communication, on helping the prospect achieve business value. Getting the contract signed was a means to the end. Very, very powerful techniques. So how do we do that? Well, here's some examples of some different questions that we want all of our sales reps asking to build out these plans. And getting very specific information is key to driving this. So here's a couple examples. Open-ended questions, which many of you are very good at asking. What is your purchasing processes? What do you need to see to be convinced to do this? Once you make the decision to move forward, then what happens? Because oftentimes the people in the decision-making process are different than the people that have to execute those decisions. And we all know who those people are that we love to work with, but procurement, once we get there, it's a very different set of processes. Probing questions. If we know that we aren't having access to power or have all of those individuals in the process, we know we're at risk. So can we add dates and specific times to include those other stakeholders? If we're going to focus on the business results, we have to ask specific questions. When do you need to see these results? When do you need to demonstrate that these problems are solved, that the impact is realized in all of those? So just some examples of different questions. And then on the confirmation side, because everything we teach our clients is this whole OPC questioning process, making sure that we have it complete and that they are ready to take action. It's another kind of trial close early on in the sales cycle before you get into working the plan and working the timeline and working through all of those agreed upon tasks, activities, and milestones to make sure that we're both on the same page. Then is this it? If we go through this and it's successful and you're convinced, will you be in a position to sign by December 15th as we had originally agreed to in this timeline? And asking those questions. So these are very powerful questions to make sure that we're building out this plan and effectively communicating that back in our written communication. Here's a simple example of what it looks like. And if you've been a client of value selling, you understand that our qualification process maps to our value prompter, which is a tool that we use to organize information. But when we say summarize their reasons to buy, we're talking about summarizing those exact elements of qualification. The vision match, which includes an overview of the business, the problems, their view of the solution, how we satisfy that solution, and the value they expect to realize from that. And then a simple time frame that we can put together. And here's just a couple of random type activities that often are a part of the different types of plans. What happens with your prospects is going to be different in terms of what is your typical process. Do they want a trial environment? Do they want to kick the can with your technology? Do you need to do a demo? Do they want a reference? Do they need to speak with a technical resource? Whatever those proof of concept activities are, making sure that you identify those, put a time frame to them, and get those commitments are important. The number one reason this reverse timeline works so effectively is because it's focused on business value. It is not focused, nor does it end when you get the order. It's focused on their results, and that in and of itself will differentiate you from the competitors that you're selling against, who are typically going to focus on getting their order, and you're focused on getting their value. So, what are some of the key things that I would like you to remember as a result of this? And if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the question tab, and I'll be happy to address them as we go through that. Number one, put the plan in writing. Written communication is critical, and it's often overlooked. For most of us, email is the written communication platform of choice. Assume it's going to get forwarded. So make sure that when you're sending that email, that it's clear, it's concise, it's formatted, it's easy to read, and all of those things that go with it. I assume, as I said earlier, that plan is going to get forwarded. So I want to make sure that it's clear and concise, doesn't include acronyms, doesn't include jargon, and is about them. It allows you to be much more proactive in managing what has to happen in your sales cycle. It's interesting to me that so many sales reps often feel like they are, the dog being wagged by the tail, and are not in control or not in complete control of what's going on. And forcing yourself to build a habit on these plan letters can be very, very powerful. Templatize it. You can create the template in Salesforce. You can create it in your CRM. You can create it in your email. You can create it in Word and drop it into any email. However, it's most easy for you to work. Create the template, reflect the client language, and build the habit. One of the things that we find is once we have this plan in place and have the buy-in to the timeline, it puts us in a much stronger position when the timeline starts to creep and slip, which will happen for various reasons. Maybe they were over-aggressive on how much they could get done. Maybe the opportunity wasn't as qualified and there's still some more work to do. Maybe something changed, either external to the situation or internal to your prospect. But when that plan creep happens, you are now in a position to ask for something in return because they're going back on their agreements. And that might be asking to regain access to some of the key stakeholders. It might be in a position, if you're recreating that timeline, to ask for something else that might be valuable to you, a reference, a testimonial, a press release that they selected you. There might be some things that you can ask for as a result of that plan creep. So, what do we think is key for this? And number one, qualification is not a linear event. Wouldn't it be great if I could just say, well, I did that check, now they're ready to buy. Things come in and out of qualification all the time. So the key to this whole process is to be continually requalifying and reassessing the health of the opportunity. Your timeline has to be connected to recognized business issues, which means they have to be time-bound. I don't want to improve revenue someday. I need to improve my revenue by mid-year 2019 to demonstrate my credibility. I need to improve it by 10% by mid-year 2019. I need to cut costs or improve productivity or increase efficiency by X amount by this date. Time-bound and measurable allows us to use that to create this timeline. It's not a someday, maybe I'll get there. It's no, this is critical now because. Quantify and agree on the value. When we're having these value conversations, that is also a great opportunity for our trial closes, which says, hey, if you are successful at achieving X results that we've identified, is that enough to motivate you to take action? Is that enough for you to make this investment? Is that enough for you to select us to do business with? Great opportunity to ask those questions from that perspective. And then really using this whole concept of backward thinking with this reverse timeline. Such an easy to understand technique and often overlooked concept. Even when we look at some of the plan letters, 90% of them end with sign on the dotted line, and I'm going to kick the can over, throw you over the transom to implementation, or I'm going to introduce you to your account manager, or I'm going to transition you to the implementation team. Doesn't focus on value, focuses on the next step or the purchasing act itself. So we've talked about this. Evaluate your written communication. Is your written follow-up giving you the opportunity to follow through with your prospect and enable them to reconfirm why they're going to take action, when they're going to take action, and how they're going to realize value? Create those templates, whichever is the easiest way for you, that you can start to drop that in. I've got clients that have it in email. We've got clients that do it in CRM, but it will be much easier for you to build the habit if you templatize this approach and then just edit and adapt to reflect the language of your prospect as you're going. And remember, the reason this works is it's a plan about them achieving their value from you, not about you delivering a product or service that's valuable. It's a subtle but very powerful difference in how this plan is worded. It's about them. It's confirming their reasons, their language, their paradigm, their sharing of information with you.